Hi, Norman.
Okay, how are you?
Fine. Welcome. Please tell us about Norman Moyo. Who is Norman Moyo?
In brief, Francis, I would say I like to call myself Pan-African. I'm a Pan-African executive, business executive. But before that, I'm a father of three, married father
Okay.
of three,
Mm-hmm.
with a daughter, a son, and two boys to my name, and married for the past 26 years. We're just celebrating 26 years of marriage to my beautiful
Wow. Wow.
Josephine. Yes. So
Congratulations.
yeah, so that would be Norman Moyo, the person, the business person, Pan-African telecoms technology, and predominantly now renewable energy specialist, having spent a lot of years in the continent, coming original out of Zimbabwe, born out of Zimbabwe, but I have done my tour of duty into Zambia, into Nigeria, into Bahrain, and into Tanzania, and
Mm.
currently running a renewable energy tech company in South Africa. Francis, I've got a day job, I've got a night job, and I've got a midnight job, and I'm proud of
Wow.
all of them. My day job is running a renewable energy company called Grid Africa, trying to solve this crisis in energy, this existential crisis in energy in sub-Saharan Africa in particular. So that's what I do for my day job. I develop energy solutions for data centers, commercial and industrial, and telecom towers, to ensure that I can deliver energy security, cost, and carbon into the continent. I say that's my day job, which means there's a night
Mm.
job. At night, Francis, my view of the world is, especially as us Africans, we don't focus so much on the things that matter. I always say we chase three B's
Mm.
incessantly:
Okay.
BMW, booze, and babes. And when
Wow.
it is in the room, I say, and bays. And
Mm.
I've been encouraging my Pan-African people to say, try to replace one of those B's with business, especially the last one, because it will
Yeah.
get you in trouble. And
Mm-hmm.
in 2013, I was able to put together 30 Pan-African leaders, and I encouraged them to invest in property. And we raised nearly $1 million, and we started buying apartments in Johannesburg. So we own and manage 75 apartments right now in Johannesburg, between
Mm.
Four Winds and Sandton City. So that's my night job. I crowd in capital into property investments, which means I've got a midnight job. Now,
Mm.
at midnight, I try to lecture. So I've been lecturing at the Stellenbosch Business School for the
Mm.
past 7 years now, lecturing on perspectives on African frontiers, how to do business in Africa. I obviously authored a leadership book, as you might know, Rumble
Yeah.
in the Jungle,
Yeah.
Leadership from African Perspective. Because of the book, I'm therefore finding myself in very exciting places. That includes the Stellenbosch Business School, MBA, but I also speak at a lot of leadership, counsel a lot of leadership groups in the continent. A number of blue chip companies I've been working with them. So you name them, from Coca-Cola to Unilever to Old Mutual, most of the banks, they invite me to discuss about leadership in Africa, strategy, execution, and profit, which are the key themes that run through my leadership book. So that's who I am. I
Wow.
operate with 5 values, as you know:
Mm-hmm.
legacy, integrity, lifelong learning,
Mm-hmm.
work, and profit. So for me,
Wow.
very important that whatever encounter we have, whether it's at a working relationship point of view, in this conversation, I'm able to plant a seed, and a seed that can grow, and something we can look back years from now and says that seed was planted when I had a chat with Norman, when I worked with Norman, or when Norman worked for me as a shareholder. That's my legacy value. For me, integrity is about, I like a good night's sleep. I like to sleep well at night.
Yeah.
So I don't have to remember anything I sign because it has to always be above board. You and me spend a lot of time in markets like Nigeria, and I
Yeah.
walked out of there with my head high. I was very
Yeah.
proud.
Yeah.
Lifelong learning says if you want to hide money from an African, you put it in a book. Not this African. I'll find that money because as a people, we need to embrace the culture of reading and study.
Wow, beautiful. I mean, you've really enumerated quite a lot in such a time. Now, what has informed this thinking? Because I mean, as you said, you have a day job, a night job, and a midnight job, and I can see leadership traits. I can see things that are actually interesting. What has actually informed this approach, and when did you come up with all these ideas and ideals about life and leadership?
A lot of it is mostly driven by this desire for lifelong learning. When you read, when you study, you learn a lot. So, for instance, when I do my day job, there is no conflict. There is no iota of conflict with my midnight job. But a lot of us tend to live off and use only 11% of our brain power. Where is the other 22? Why not double your use of your brain power? A lot of us don't know how to manage time so well. And in the course of the reading, I stumbled on a book called The 4-Hour Work Week. And it says a lot of people at executive level, you could do a lot in the first 4 hours of the day. But how do you create that space that is profitable for yourself? So I have always thrived to push myself to the limit, but I've also tried to do it in a very smart way. So for me, work is about working smarter. Managing time is a core competence that I need to build on. I argue that Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Norman Moyo all have got 24 hours a day. What we do with that 24 hours is what makes the difference between an Elon Musk and a Norman Moyo. Now, how do we increase return on time? How do we increase return per hour? And time is something that is available to all of us. And it's a massive resource for a senior manager like myself. And what I do with my time is a key catalyst for my growth and my ability to increase my productivity. So I try to obviously really immerse myself in the reading culture. Francis, I'm able to read 2 books every week without fail. Wow. I read 2 books every week, and people think it's special. No, nothing. When I'm in Joburg here, I jump into a car, I read it from Audible. Now, Audible is a book. You learn a lot from Audible. I start my car, immediately a chapter comes on. By the time I land home, I've done 2 chapters. Going back to the office, same. Going to golf, same. So you embrace that culture of reading. But I also found reading for me is about season. Don't read randomly. Read in season. What is your season? We all have seasons. You might be in the season for love. You are in a new relationship. That's your season. You need to learn a lot about that relationship, that season of love. And there's a book for that season. You might be in the season of trying to fix your marriage. There is a book for that season. If you ask me, it's called 7 Principles of Marriage. If you ask me, it's called Finding and Keeping Love. Francis, as marketers, there are 5 P's in marketing. As a married man, as a married woman, do you know the 5 P's in marriage? The answer is most likely no. You have never heard of it. But they are there and they are written. Most marriages fail because people don't invest in that subject. So for me, reading is about season. So if I'm in the season for energy, I've been in the season for renewable energy for the past 8 years. And lo and behold, I have gone through most of the IP, most of the written material that really speaks to the renewable energy, the technologies, the new technologies, the problem that the customers are facing. Reading in season. I was 7 years ago, I started a renewable energy as a co-founder, CEO, and I had to read about the lean startup. Then immediately I had to read about the art of startup capital raise. Again, season. We all have a season. You know, I happen to be the sweet type, or the doctor likes to call it diabetic. I have been managing my diabetes to an extent that I'm about to reverse my type 2 diabetes. I found the solution in a book. It's called The Diabetic Code. So for me, Francis, it's about really continuous improvement by really immersing yourself on the existing information, IP, written material that is out there. Reading needs to be in our DNA. But to make it easier for those who don't like to read, find your season first.
Beautiful.
And the season, when you find your season, you go to Chat GPT. It says, my season is about my relationship. Which book should I read? Chat GPT will tell you exactly which books to.
You're right. You're right. Thank you very much. Now you see that you are a very busy and intentional leader. How has this cascaded to the people that try to follow you or try to follow you at work or at any of your different times?
Thank you. I mentor a lot of people in the continent, and it's an honor for me to be called a mentor. And these are people that in organizations that I do leadership talks, and this is a big part of it because the leadership events I normally anchor are leadership events that really targets middle to senior and executive management. And I can relate to that very well, but I also emerge with a lot of mentees that are asking me the difficult questions. How do we deal with politics in the organization? How do I grow my career? How do I deal with this idiot of a boss? And then I answer, there is an idiot of a boss in every organization. So please don't leave your organization because you're running away from an idiot, because you will find the next one. Learn the emotional intelligence to deal with an idiot of a boss. That's just, it's normal. Now, to answer your questions, for me, everyone, those that I work with, I share my values. I share my values, my 5 values, which I went up to lifelong learning. Then there's work and profit. But everyone who has ever worked with me or reported into me needs to know those values and the fact that they're non-negotiable. Now, I stumbled on those values because some good consultant one day worked with me and he helped me. Everyone has got their own values. You can't use my values. They're not yours. Mine are very important. You will find that legacy means a lot to me. Profit means a lot to me. I like to win. I'm a very competitive animal. But when I win, whether I win in a game of golf or I win by achieving my targets, my budget, I leave a legacy. There's very little legacy you leave if you were working for Enron. It went under. And so you delete it on your CV. That's the quickest thing you can do. So for me, understanding your values is key. But people around you also need to understand what makes you tick, what are your negotiables, what are your non-negotiables. The other thing, Francis, is to surround yourself with very smart people. I always say, I drive a big car. When I was in Lagos, I had a beautiful Land Cruiser. And I never understood why I needed big cars. Then I found out I have a big ego. I'm a short man, and we tend to come with a big ego. So I need a big car with a big boot so I can pack my ego in that car every time I walk into a meeting, every time I walk into an office, every time I walk into a situation. I don't allow my ego to get the better of my good judgment. And so even the people around me knows that I like to surround myself with some of the smartest people. Of late, I have even learned to embrace those who disagree with me. Because if 2 people share the same idea on everything, we don't need the other person. So I have to learn the art of judo, that you will find people that do not like the fact that I talk too much. They do not like the fact that I am a creative marketer. They do not like so many things about me. But I've had to accept that in us, there are Ferraris and there are Fords in every team.
Yeah.
I'm a typical Ferrari, very fast, very creative, but I'm terrible at detail. I need to surround myself with Ford. I'm not talking about the other Ford that started catching fire. I'm talking about the big American Ford, the one you
Yeah.
use when you're going into the village, the one that you know you can go into the most roughest part and come back. So in my teams, in people around me, I need a good mix of Fords and Ferraris. I know myself and I know my weaknesses as a Ferrari, and I'm terrible at it. I don't even know how to read an email. Yeah, I had an email about a meeting happening in DRC, which got changed to London. And I landed in DRC for that meeting because when they changed the meeting, they didn't go down, they didn't change the headline. They kept on talking in the main body. I don't know how to read a main body of an email. So what do I need? I need people around me that support me, that complement my weaknesses. But I'm strong in certain things, and where I'm good at, I am damn good at. And where I'm bad at, it's good that I get to know where I struggle. So I think those are some of the things that I obviously work with within my own teams, but also even some of the people that I mentor. There is a group here called Shanduka that Umbrella, I think it's called Umbrella Group, which has been sponsored by the president of South Africa, where they've been sending us a lot of young entrepreneurs to mentor them. And a lot of them have really succeeded by just being able to be provided that guidance on how to walk this difficult path in life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to just keep this thing to a very short time because you have so much to give in this short time. Now, I just want let's go to your transition from telecoms to energy. You said you did that about 7 years ago, and I see that you just gotten equity investment recently. Now, what informed that transition, and where do you see the energy journey going to, or the future of energy in Africa?
What transformed the transition from telecoms into energy? I would blame it on your country, Nigeria, obviously. I enjoyed my time in Lagos so much that, and I think the scale that we operated it in Airtel now, used to be Celtel then, was a fascinating space. Firstly, in the potential that telecoms could do to a continent. We moved from 5 million customers to 20 million customers in 36 months, from $500 million to $1.8 billion in 36 months. We worked together. I was the chief marketing officer. I had a huge responsibility in driving the top line. When you come out of there, it becomes very difficult to find a challenge of that magnitude. So I moved out of there and I did a stint at Etisalat in Tanzania, where I was the acting CCO and I became the CEO for 2 years. But I can tell you, Francis, it became quite an anticlimax when you are coming from an environment like Lagos. There is nothing as exciting as a market like Nigeria, especially in telecoms. Now, I started to itch for learning. I felt I wasn't learning anymore. Now, I got an opportunity to move into Helios Towers. And then, for a marketer who has never done engineering in their life, it was very fascinating to be a CEO of a telecom infrastructure company. So it was a very easy transition from mainstream telecoms to telecom infrastructure. But I knew I was going to learn new skills, because until then, I was just good marketer, celebrated marketer, but I had not managed operations in a deep way. And then that's what got me into Helios Towers. Really, as their early CEO there was almost, I think, their founding CEO in Helios Towers. We rolled out and we deployed nearly 5,000 telecom towers, some through acquisition, some through what we call build to suit. Now, the most fascinating part then became, we had a unique problem. I was supposed to sell infrastructure. So telecoms is telecom infrastructure. It's like the real estate of of telecoms. So you sell
Yeah.
co-location and you sell power at the bottom together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was a fascinating concept. It was a fascinating new concept, even in Africa. I was probably one of the early Black CEOs to ever run a towerco in Africa. So I learned a lot in that business. But one of the things I learned was the real issue of the complexity of power in Africa. And by the time I finished with Helios, we started having problems with the cost of energy, but also theft of batteries. We had a problem with just the reliability of the energy infrastructure in Africa. When I rejoined Econet, because I had worked for Econet up to 2000, then I spent 17 or so years in the continent, and then the Econet group called me back to launch an IoT business, Internet of Things business. Again, fascinating. I didn't last for more than 9 months in IoT. We quickly pivoted into energy. And the reason was very simple, Francis. You know, when I read, I find out that there are two types of business in the world. There are Panadol businesses and there are vitamin C businesses. Panadol, you take it. The doctor will prescribe it for you. You will take it. You might even forget to take it tomorrow, and you still go to work. But if you have got a headache, you do not forget to take your Panadol. And I asked myself at some stage, is IoT a vitamin C or a Panadol, or is power a Panadol? The continent had a massive headache. And in Africa, when you've got a massive headache, you take Panadol. Yeah. And I quickly engaged my shareholder, and I literally had to beg that I would like to set up an energy business. And fortuitously, that same month I came to South Africa, around 2015, is when load shedding started. Now, I had lived in Nigeria where power was going off very elegantly every 30 minutes to an hour. And suddenly in South Africa, they had now 1 hour, 2 hours. Now they had very fancy name for it called load shedding. And they were very, very smart about it. It will go away at 6, it will be back at 8. And they were really, but it was inefficiency whichever way. It was a crisis whichever way. And then I immediately realized this is the Panadol for the continent. But what was even more exciting was also the developments in the renewable energy space, the developments at a climate level where the adoption of renewables became a real focus globally. And we found Africa was sweetly positioned to leapfrog what we consider the legacy infrastructure of wires, cables, which reminded me of telecoms. Wires, cables. We had wires, cables in telephone, and we leapfrogged and we started GSM. So this time there was also an opportunity to leapfrog and go distributed energy, where I then said every home, every clinic, and every business in Africa should be able to generate its own power, should be able to generate its own solar, and should be able to store that power in a battery and need not suffer a blackout. And that solution is cheaper than the current grid that's available today, or a hell lot cheaper than running a generator. So suddenly a new economy started to emerge. And I have been at it for the past 8 years. It's been the most fulfilling journey for me. It also got me away, Francis, from a corporate environment to an entrepreneurial environment. Remember I said, I had to start reading a different book. When I was in Lagos, I had to read Who Says Elephant Can't Dance? Because I was part of a big group called Celtel Nigeria. When I got here, I had to read the lean startup. I had to learn to raise capital. I had to learn to bootstrap and build a business with no capital. And over the past 5 to 7 years, I even had to learn to onboard strategic investors. So we onboarded EDF as a strategic investor into DPA. We have since rebranded from DPA. We have now launched Grid Africa, which is now driven mostly by management. We without the other shareholders, and we are busy bringing in new shareholders again. We have learned the art of crowdfunding and crowding in capital to drive a vision. So that has been the journey into the renewables. I continue to believe as energy is Africa's Achilles heels right now, a serious existential crisis that the continent is suffering. As I speak to you, we just launched a business in Zambia, nearly 20 hours of no power. There is no nation that can survive with 20 hours of running a generator. It's the fastest way to the bottom. You will destroy society, you destroy businesses, you destroy generations if we don't fix that problem. And yet we've got a solution. If you deploy solar, batteries, and other renewables, wind, and the like, the technology price is now very affordable. The know-how now exists. The financing is also now available. And the expertise is now built up. And this is why, for me, I'm in a very fascinating space, and we continue to crowd in partners, whether they are strategic partners. We just announced Huawei as a strategic partner yesterday, or whether they are equity investors, or whether they are climate investors, whether they are your developmental agencies looking to build capacity. We have got the highest impact to influence employment in Africa by riding on this crisis. So you never waste away a good crisis.
Now, it's so interesting. I mean, I dare say that, what do you think about, you've lived in Lagos, what do you think about the energy crisis in Nigeria? And how would you tackle it if given the chance?
In my book, so just to be clear, in my book, there's a chapter called Chaos by Design. So I do not, sometimes I wonder, what is the problem? Because Nigeria does not have a generation problem. Nigeria might struggle with an infrastructure problem in terms of transmission, the lines, because just the infrastructure is not well developed. But the rest of Africa, by the way, we struggle with actual generation. Firstly, we slept on the wheel, the governments, the utilities, the private players, everyone slept on the job, forgot to continue to maintain the infrastructure. We also suffer from the climate effects of lack of rains. Right now, Zimbabwe and Zambia is supported by Kariba Dam, and that dam is below 10% and requires probably 4 to 5 years worth of continuous rains. So there are certain structural issues, fundamental constraints, climatic constraints that are affecting, say, sub-Saharan Africa. Nigeria has got a very different problem. I say, Francis, if there was a role for president of Africa, and if I was to get that job, there are 5 things in Africa that I would need to fix. Number 1 would have been education. We still need to fix it. Number 2 is health. Number 3 would have been telecoms. We fixed it. Number 3 is energy. And number 5 is leadership. Okay? So leadership becomes probably our biggest challenge when it comes to energy in Nigeria. We make jokes about the minister. At some stage in our life, we had ministers selling generators. And I'm thinking, how are you going to legislate or try to support the fixing of the grid if you're also involved in the business of generator? It could have been a joke. But that joke resonates very well if you look at the struggles of keeping the grid afloat in Nigeria. So it's a leadership issue. Leadership all the way from the top, permeating down to the utilities. But also a leadership issue from a corporate point of view. Because why are corporates not leaning on solar? Why are they not putting in alternative sources of energy? Why are they not finding better and cheaper distributed energy solutions? It has taken so long for Nigeria to adopt the distributed energy space. So, unfortunately, it's going to take a change in mindset. It's going to take a change in the way we think, the way we approach some of the problems that we have at hand. both at a private sector level and at a government level. But I'm always very shy of blaming governments, because for me, governments do the best that they can. There is a need for the private sector, firstly, for the government to let go of things that they're not good at. And government is never good at trying to run private business. You'll be surprised what we are seeing in sub-Saharan Africa. The governments have woken up to the fact that our business is not to be providing power to the corporates. You corporates, you need to sort your house, put your house in order. Anyone can put solar. You can run an entire mine using solar today. You can run any home using solar and batteries. And the government now needs to bring along, like what they did in telecoms. They deregulated, removed their hands off the fixed line, introduced MTN, Glo, and Airtel, and before you knew it, we solved the problem of telecoms. The government needs to do exactly the same. Let go of those wires, allow the private sector to come in. Don't worry, it will cause a bit of a dissonance, but the winds is behind us, because large corporates, Diageo's, Coca-Cola's, the MTNs, and the Glos, they have got also a global agenda for decarbonization. So everyone can ride on that wave. And before you know it, the electricity problem in Nigeria will be solved. Leave it to the private sector, and you will see the private sector has got a way of reaching an equilibrium. I studied economics at the university. It has got a way of reaching equilibrium. The government's desire to protect the ordinary man in the street can still be achieved if we find the right mindset. But this idea of subsidizing energy in Africa is what has gotten us into a hole. The first law of holes: when you fall into a hole, you stop digging.
Thanks, Norman. I think if I get into this, we'll have so much talk about energy. But let's go back to leadership, innovation and leadership. And what I have seen is that despite your move in different industries, you have actually stuck to your values, okay? But how do you keep maintaining that, we call it ease in Nigeria, that resilience and resoluteness in the face of changing environment, rapidly evolving and changing environment? How have you been able to do this? Because I know that Africa, the continent of Africa, is really, really a place where sometimes you cannot really determine or say that this is where you're going to be when you wake up the next day. How have you maintained that resoluteness?
I think the first thing to your point is, as an individual, there is that need to understand who you are, how you operate, what makes you tick, what are your non-negotiables. I talk about the long-term agenda when I mentor people. Everyone needs to have a long-term agenda. A long-term agenda for me, Francis, was about, in the next 5 years, I was going to be a CMO. Then I was going to be a CEO of a company. Then I said, thereafter, I'm going to be a CEO of a company where I own some equity. I articulated that as far back as 2006 when I was still in Zambia, leaving for Nigeria. Of course, I had read it somewhere. For me, just be careful, everything, I read it somewhere. I had read it somewhere. I even have got a space where I said, after I finish CEO/co-founder, which is the season I'm in now, I have got the next role. I can never tell you that role. Someone might come after me. But I gave myself a long-term agenda. The reason I did that is it guides me, Francis, as opportunities come. It's not like you don't get poached by people who are offering you a very attractive opportunity, but you need to look at your long-term agenda. And when you with the technology, you can actually plaster what that long-term agenda looks like. I ask you, open a page put the car that you want to drive, the community you are living in, so that's how you paint that picture on your long-term agenda. The kind of work that you are doing, and you have made it, Francis. You have arrived. Which country do you live in? What is your kids doing? What's your wife doing? What are you doing? What role are you doing? Paint it. What car are you driving? You need to even paint the car. You need to have a car. Don't tell me about a car that's going to be designed in 2020. No, based on today's cars, which one will you be driving? What job will you be doing? So I do that normally. And then with my values, it then helps me to navigate. I don't suffer fools easily in terms of there's a shiny object that just popped up and I go for it. But the legacy value then helps you walk through that. Does this opportunity create that legacy? Is my integrity going to be challenged if I continue to stay in this place? Am I growing? Is this opportunity part of my 10-year long-term agenda? So I navigate it that way. I have moved, as you know, from Southern Africa to Zambia, to Nigeria, to the Middle East, to East Africa. Now I'm back in South Africa. And these are very different markets, different socio-political setups. You deal with all sorts of issues: tribalism, sexism, racism. You deal with all those. But what I've always found is if you're very clear on where you are going, you're very clear on your values, it makes it easier. But I would also add that it's important to personally, continuously improve yourself in whatever role you are doing. I started, as you know, as a banker.
Yeah.
I started with Standard Chartered Bank. And there are lessons that I learned in that bank that have stayed with me for the past 28 years. I talk to people about the car I drive. I give them a story about how my first car at Standard Chartered Bank, I got a loan. I bought a BMW 5 Series. It was like, BMW 250, I think, whatever they call it, small little one. They've got a name for it here in South Africa. It's the most popular BMW you can drive. But it was like the sixth hand. It was so old. I showed up at my manager's office. I put the keys in front. Obviously, I'm very proud. It's my first car ever. They gave me a loan and I bought it. Of my manager, and my manager looked at the key. He says, "Oh my God, I hope, Norman, you didn't buy that car with the money we gave you." I said, "Oh no, it's a very old car. Like it's 15 years old." He said, No, you have to return it." I thought she was joking. Why would I return it? She says, "Norman, you cannot drive a BMW. A BMW is classified as a high value, expensive car, luxury car. Your job in the bank is to go out there and convince depositors to give you their depositors' money so you can bring it into the bank. And you're going to flash your BMW keys and you expect the customer to feel safe with you." I thought, then 2 weeks later, I got a call from HR and said, Norman, did you replace your car?
Wow.
And I thought, I had to sell it. Till to date, I still look at that car with a lot of envy because I never got to drive it. And I ended up buying a Corolla. That was a discipline that was entrenched in me about why your integrity matters and why you should protect it with everything that you have. Why it's probably one of the few things that are non-negotiable around me, that integrity. But that's also what allows you to move from country to country. I operated in Nigeria, Francis. I'm proud to have spent $300 million in my time there. I signed off $300 million and I slept well at night. KPMG, by the time I left, had an audit and we had one of the cleanest audit reports after spending $300 million as chief marketing officer. And there are a few things in life you don't put together. You don't put a $300 million marketing and a tough market like Nigeria together. You get into trouble very easily. But I walked out of there with my head high. So for me, those values, if there was anything I would recommend, is what got me there. And if you want to know your values, get an expert. Don't try to wing it. You can't wing it. We are different. Your value and your fingerprint, you are as unique as your fingerprint. When you get to understand the value, then things becomes easier.
Thank you very much. The last question I'll put forward to you would be, what leadership advice will you give to emerging leaders who want to make an impact in whatever business they're doing in Africa?
I think the first thing is Africa is a very difficult place to do business, not for any other reason apart from we need to appreciate what the continent is about, who lives in the continent. My book says Perspectives on African Frontier, how to do business in Africa. It's not to say it's any different to any part, but you have got to understand the little nuances about the continent. I learned a lot when I was in Nigeria. I came in there and I was humbled so many times when I then appreciated that Nigeria was not one country. It was probably to us at Celtel, it became like 6 regions, which were bigger than most countries in Africa.
Yes.
It became a fact that the southern part had a very different ways of working to the northern part. It became very clear that the advert you do in the southern part could be insulting the guys in the north.
Yeah.
And you accept that, and then you lean into some of these nuances, and you allow yourself to be teachable. You allow yourself to be a student. The second piece is Africa has got some of the most amazing talent. Francis, the past 7 years, I have surrounded myself with some of the smartest women in the continent. And it's deliberate. I said women in the continent. I have found some of the best talent in the women in Africa. And I'm thinking, Oli, why do we struggle to cultivate that talent and bring it all the way to the executive level? When the whole world has now realized the power of the women in business. So as a leader, you now need to be deliberate and intentional on finding the talent that will take you to the next level. What got us here won't get us where we need to get to as a continent. So as a leader, I am saying, watch out for that talent, particularly the women and some of the people that are not necessarily will always show up as your trendsetters. As a leader, look out for that. As a leader, I said, continue to develop yourself. And as a leader, understand the value of your reputation and your brand. We all have got a brand to upkeep. It will take you 10 years to build and 10 seconds to destroy. Watch it, protect it with everything that you have.
Thank you very, very much, Norman. Thank you for giving us this time. I know you're a busy executive, but I mean, I could go for 2 hours straight talking with you. I know that you always have something to say. But thanks for this short time with you, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much, Norman.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Keep on.
Okay, bye.